Jubes and Kerr, me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Good morning, it's 9:30 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and radio. Well, today we're going to explore Beergate in further detail with a Conservative MP. Are the Tories really mudslinging? We're also going to look ahead to the local elections with a polling expert, and the former First Minister of Northern Ireland will be here to talk about the legislative elections in the province. All that coming after your morning headlines.
A very good morning. It's 9:32. I'm Rosie Wright, here to keep you up to date today on GB News. Boris Johnson's going to address Ukraine's parliament via video link this morning. As the first world leader to address Ukrainian MPs since the war began, the Prime Minister will say this is Ukraine's finest hour and that the UK is proud to be among their friends. The government are also going to announce a new £300 million package of defensive military aid for Ukraine and send specialised civilian protection vehicles. Well, in Ukraine, more than 200 civilians are still holed up with fighters in Mariupol's steel plant. The city's mayor said a total of 100,000 people are still in the besieged southern city that has currently been occupied by Russian forces. In the US, a leaked initial draft suggests that the Supreme Court will vote to overturn the Roe v. Wade decision that legalized abortion nationwide in America. The draft's been obtained by the US news agency Politico. It shows that the Supreme Court would be inclined to uphold Mississippi's abortion ban. Post office workers are staging a one-day strike in a dispute over pay today. Members of the Communication Workers Union said the strike is over last year's pay freeze and the offer of a 2% increase from April this year. A post office spokesperson said the vast majority of branches are unaffected and will remain open throughout the day. On the 15th anniversary of her disappearance, the parents of Madeleine McCann say it's essential they learn the truth of what happened to their daughter. Madeleine went missing from the family's holiday apartment in Portugal in 2007. A genetic test to spot a rare form of eye cancer in babies in the womb is being rolled out across the NHS for families at risk. The test identifies, though, with retinoblastoma, it's likely to identify around 50 cases each year in England. You're up to date on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. Now let's head to Tom for the briefing.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:34 and this is the briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. Now, Keir Starmer has accused Conservative MPs of mudslinging over footage of him drinking a beer with colleagues while lockdown restrictions were in place. Yes, this morning the Labour leader insisted there was no party, no rules were broken, and there's nothing more I can add to that. Well, with the local elections just around the corner, he also added, "This is a few days from the election. I know what's going on here. Tories are desperately trying to talk about anything other than the cost of living, chucking as much mud as possible. If they spent as much energy on focusing on people's bills and the tax that they're whacking on people, for then the millions of people would be grateful for that. So I think this is a classic 2 or 3 days before an election mudslinging from the Tories." Yet, looking into the details of the case, these were the rules at the time of his socialising. You must not socialise indoors, campaigners should not gather in groups, and you should not meet up with other campaigners indoors. Those were the rules in April 2021. So is there any difference between Boris's Downing Street behaviour compared to Keir's curry and Beergate? Well, joining me is Matt Vickers, Conservative MP for Stockton South. Welcome to the programme, Matt. First of all, this morning, Keir Starmer accused you and your Conservative colleagues of mudslinging. Is that what you're doing?
Good morning, Tom. Do you know what? I think everybody sat at home will see this exactly for what it is. We've seen for however many months now, it's all he's wanted to talk about. Every PMQs, when he could have been talking about Ukraine, he could have been talking about the cost of living. He's been asking questions about Partygate. In fact, he's been asking questions about people gathering in their place of work, which is now subject to 3 different investigations. We've got the police investigation, we've got the Sue Gray investigation, we've now got a standards investigation. But he's refused to confirm if he'll cooperate with a police investigation on the issue. All of a sudden, he wants to stop talking about the issue, but there's lots of questions to answer. This isn't a gang of people who were in their office who happened to gather. This is a gang of people, apparently as many as 30 of them, who came together from across the country. They weren't sat in an office all day. They come together from across the country. We had all the questions. His excuse that, we were working, eating during the working day. He was eating at 10 o'clock at night. We also know that he could have eaten back at his hotel. It all seems a bit fishy. We've heard about Angela Rayner. She wasn't there. Oops, she was there. Lots of questions to be answered on his part, and he just doesn't seem to be willing to answer them.
To ask, but do you see a certain contradiction, a sort of swapping of clothes of the parties? For months and months and months, as you rightly say, the Labour Party wanted to talk about nothing other than parties, and now suddenly they want to talk about the cost of living, not parties. Well, to some extent, with some Conservative MPs, it seems to be the opposite. Conservative MPs wanting to talk about the cost of living and indeed Ukraine and other world affairs, important things that matter to people for the last 3 or 4 months, and now suddenly many more Conservative MPs are wanting to talk about parties.
I think what makes it worse is the fact that all the time he's been going on about this, all the time he's been distracting the world's media, been distracting government, been distracting Parliament. He knew he was up in Durham with people from across the country at some sort of gathering, apparently as many as 30 of them. The deputy leader, turns out, was there. It doesn't seem to have been in compliance with the rules at all. It's one rule for one and one rule for another. It's the nerve of the chap and the fact he could stand there doing that, knowing all along what he'd been up to in Durham.
I suppose this could be put to bed with a investigation, a similar investigation, such as the one that the Prime Minister initially opened himself up to, the initial Sue Gray investigation, which of course is exploring not just what the Prime Minister got up to, but in the majority what civil servants and indeed political aides were getting up to, not just in Downing Street, but Whitehall and across government too. Would you call for Keir Starmer to open himself up to a similar sort of investigation to clear the air so that we can find out exactly what happened here?
I think there are so many questions unanswered. I think it's got to be done. We've seen three different investigations going on around the Downing Street issues, I think it's got to happen. I think the police have to pay attention. You can't have rules in one part of the country and different rules in another, regardless of who the police and crime commissioner might be for a particular force.
Interesting point there, Matt Vickers. Are you suggesting that potentially because the police and crime commissioner in London is Sadiq Khan, in effect, that might have been a political element to what the police have been investigating and how harshly they may have been applying the rules in London compared to in other parts of the country?
Well, there seems to be a difference in how hard they're applying the rules. Most certainly, we had a group of people who work in the same office, might or might not have had a birthday cake, happened to be in the room, some for as few as 9 minutes or less. Meanwhile, we've got people who've trailed from all over the country, as many as 30 of them, gathered for a party at 10 o'clock at night. I don't think they could have gone back. Well, they haven't been able to tell us what they went back to work to do after 10 o'clock at night in that office in the middle of Durham. So I think there is an inconsistency in the way the rules are being applied. There may be, it's not for me to decide what's right and wrong, but there's definitely questions to be answered. And I think actually those two police forces should both be applying the same rules with equal rigour.
I suppose none of this casts Westminster in a particularly rosy light. And for the last 2 weeks, we've been seeing stories and stories of more scandals unfurling, colleagues of yours resigning, investigations started into others. Is it time that Westminster needs to clean itself up?
I think it does, but I think that's down to the actions of one or two individuals who misbehaved. I think it's a very bizarre thing to cast, a net across the entire of Westminster and assume that everybody behaves in the same way. And I think that's probably part of the problem. The media are talking about this now. We've been talking about Partygate for weeks. We're now talking about one man and his phone and whatever else might have gone on in around the fringes of Parliament and applying it to the entire thing. And actually, it muddies the water for everybody. People out there, Parliament has a role to play in the future of this country. We should be talking about all the big issues that are going on today instead of talking about some of these issues. They're blown out of context. It undermines trust in government, it undermines trust in Parliament and in democracy, and it's not a healthy thing.
And just finally in this conversation, there have been some calls to close down some of the bars in Parliament. Now, I think that the bars, in my opinion, sort of add something unique to our politics that sort of makes it more clubbable. But on the other hand, there's the argument that this is creating an atmosphere where people get too easily boozed up. Finally, in this conversation, Matt Vickers, should Parliament reform its drinking culture?
I think there probably is room for that, but I think it's up to individuals to be responsible in their setting. I'm pretty sure that if you close the bars, people who wanted to would find another way to drink. But you know what, when you look at many of the things that we're talking about today, that MP who was looking at whatever he was looking at in the chamber hadn't been to a bar, don't imagine, because I don't know that it was late at night. I think we're throwing everything in, baby in with the bathwater. I think we're throwing all these issues together. We're looking at how we employ our teams. I don't think that had anything to do with some of the issues that have been raised this week at all.
Well, Matt Vickers, thank you so much for talking us through those issues this morning. Really interesting stuff. Thanks for joining us from Durham. Or Stockton South, I should say. Same sort of region. Now, Thursday's local elections are fast approaching, with Labour on course to make gains in cities in England, but struggling to break through in industrial smaller towns. 40% of the council seats that are being contested this week in England are in Labour-leaning London, which will be a key test of Labour's support under Sir Keir Starmer, despite parliamentary scandals damaging both parties. Now, this morning, Electoral Calculus has crunched the numbers on the expected outcome of those local elections. And Electoral Calculus say that Labour are likely to gain 16 councils, giving them control of 85 in total, whereas the Conservatives are expected to lose several councils, including the totemic Westminster Council, a result which would see them fall with fewer than 40 councils. Well, let's explore what this all means now with the CEO of Electoral Calculus, Martin Baxter, can join us this morning. Welcome to the programme, Martin. I suppose it's always a bit tricky guessing so close to an election. It's always more of a snapshot than a prediction, but it does look likely that the Conservatives are going to fall back on Thursday.
Yes, it does now, and in particular in comparison with the polling we did earlier in April, which showed things would be not great for the Conservatives, but not dreadful. Things have deteriorated since the Partygate fines came out. They have maybe possibly been the most expensive £100 ever paid, politically speaking, because what we've seen with the respondents we asked is that particularly Conservative voters have been disenchanted by the recent events and are not so much switching parties, less likely to turn out. What we're seeing now is that although in local elections turnout is never very high, over half of people who supported the Conservatives at the last general election are probably going to stay at home on this Thursday and not vote. And that really hurts the Conservatives much more than it was looking that it would do before the Partygate fines. So we are seeing, as you say, in London, which is not a Conservative area at all, Conservatives could lose Wandsworth and may well lose Westminster as well, which would be a big shock if that happened. And across the country, although the number of councils the Conservatives lose may not be terribly large, the number of seats will be quite big, and their overall vote share is going to look relatively bad compared with local election results going right back into the past.
So I suppose when we're talking about what's going ahead on Thursday, the extent to which that will actually bear fruit in a general election is contested. How representative might a mid-term local election be when we're looking a few years ahead? As you point out there, Conservative voters may be more likely to stay at home. They may be more likely to turn out in the case of a general election. If the Conservative Party have a complete drubbing on Thursday, what implications does that have for future general elections?
Well, you're right. That is the $1,000 question, because it is a fairly thin line between just mid-term protest voting, which the Conservatives benefited from under Tony Blair's leadership, and Tony Blair went on to win subsequent general elections. So that's one end. The other end, just a bit worse than that, where you say 15% behind or more in the polls, that is more associated with the kind of the decaying end of an out-of-steam administration, a bit like John Major in the mid-90s or even Gordon Brown around about 2008-9. So that will be the question I think that Conservative MPs are going to grapple with, and the country as well, when the results actually come out, to see whether they are sort of mid-term bad or government ending bad. That will be the question. At the moment, we've got it towards the bad end of the spectrum, but equally, it just needs to be a little bit better, and that would be a relief for the Conservatives, and they could say that things weren't so bad. But at the moment, it is looking more fin de siècle than midterm protest. But you're right, it could go either way, and we'll all be watching the actual results on Thursday to see what people really say.
We certainly will. Let's conclude this conversation now by trying to quantify what a bad result, what a very bad result, might look like for the Conservatives. I think we can probably rule out them having a good night, but what would be the difference? What do we need to watch out for in terms of what is a bad night versus a very bad night?
OK, well, let me give you two measures. One is the seats the Conservatives win, the council seats compared with Labour. We're predicting the Conservatives will win less than 1,000 and Labour will win more than 3,000. So that's a ratio of 3 to 1. 3 would be, that ratio would be fairly historic, and that would be bad. If they can get it down to more like 2 to 1, 2.5, that would be better. The other measure, which the psephologists will come up with on Thursday night, Friday morning, is the implied national vote share lead. If Labour can be 15% ahead, that's very good for them, very bad for the Conservatives. If the Conservatives can keep that, say, to 10 or 12%, then that's more manageable and looks more like a lib-term lead. So those are the two numbers I would be looking for on Friday morning to see what it means.
Well, Martin Baxter, I have written down those numbers and I will be poring over them on Friday morning. Thank you so much for talking through exactly what may be going on Thursday in those very important local elections. Thanks for joining us this morning. Well, now, in Scotland, the SNP are expected to dominate those local elections, with Labour and the Conservatives battling it out for the remaining seats. Our Scotland reporter Davy Donaldson went to East Lothian to get a sense of what issues people there would like to see improved.
Bass Rock, one of the most scenic views off the East Lothian coast, which is famous for top-class golf courses. The historic town of Dunbar is situated 30 miles east of Edinburgh and has a population of just over 10,000. So, what issues do people there want to see addressed?
We have a big lack of small industrial units. It's really strangling business. We have a huge amount of holiday homes that we need to somehow get the holiday homes taxed so they get the prices down for local people so local youth can actually stay in the area.
The coronavirus and that, just at its end there, that they, you know, with the wearing the face masks and that could have been, you know, like brought in line with what was happening in England and all the rest of it, you know, and it seemed to be that Nicola Sturgeon just seemed to keep it going and going and going, and we were the last people to, you know, lose a face mask.
That's what the people of Dunbar are looking for, but just along the motorway is the market town of Haddington. It was once the fourth largest town in Scotland in the high Middle Ages and is steeped in agricultural history. These local people told me what action they want to see taken by councillors.
I would like to see an improvement in the high streets, in just about every town, I think, in East Lothian. Big support for that. Also with the roads, that would be, I've just realised I've got a rip in my tyre from a pothole, I imagine. Support for the NHS, because actually I'm a retired nurse and I know it's been pretty awful for them. And I suppose schools as well, teachers. I've got grandchildren, so just like, although lots of support for them.
What I'd like to see happen is probably more youth centres in the town. When I was younger, we used to go to a youth centre. When I was younger, gets the kids off the street to cause a mischief. I'd like to see that more happening again in the near future. That's what I'd like to see more happening.
Well, I've been to Dunbar and Haddington trying to find out what local people want to see happen in the East Lothian Council elections. We've seen a wide range of views, really. Some people trying to get young people better onto the property ladder. Also young people in terms of youth clubs as well, get youth clubs for them to try and help them out. We've seen some people disenchanted with the SNP as well with regards to wearing face masks. So quite a lot of different things here. We'll find out more, of course, as we go to the polls, and eventually we'll find out afterwards what sort of action is going to be taken on the issues that really affect the people of East Lothian. David Donaldson, GB News.
And thanks, Davey, for that report. Now, of course, it's not just Scottish and English councils that are being elected on this Thursday, but councils in Wales as well, and perhaps most significantly, Legislative Assembly elections in Northern Ireland, which could result in a historic shift in power. The Irish nationalists Sinn Féin are polling 7 points ahead of the DUP. We're likely to see for the first time in the history of the province nationalists placing first ahead of the unionist parties. Well, who better to talk through this now with the former First Minister of Northern Ireland and GB News presenter Arlene Foster. Welcome to the programme, Arlene. I suppose we've sort of baked in this assumption that Sinn Féin is going to place first. But I suppose there'll also be a lot of adding up in terms of which unionist parties, when added together, will actually be ahead versus the ordinary first-past-the-post way of doing things.
Well, it's good to be with you, Tom. And I think the first thing to remind our viewers and listeners of is the fact that, of course, in Northern Ireland, we have a different type of devolution than the rest of the United Kingdom. We have what's called mandatory coalition. So over those years, all of the parties, all of the larger parties have actually been in the Northern Ireland Executive: Sinn Féin, DUP, SDLP, Ulster Unionist Party and the Alliance Party. But I think what you're alluding to is the fact that always throughout those years, the Unionist Party, the DUP, since 2004 has been the largest Unionist Party and the largest party in Northern Ireland. Now, I've seen many polls which have been talking about the global picture across Northern Ireland, saying that Sinn Féin are ahead. But of course, this is a PR election. Each constituency has 5 seats to fill. And whilst you can probably predict the first 4 of those seats, it's the last seats that will be critical in determining who will come out as the largest party. And some of those seats will change hands. I think we will be watching very closely some of the constituencies to see what will happen. And it's all down to transfers and what people do with those transfers. So that will come on Friday and possibly into Saturday. But I think it's still all to play for, despite the polls. I think because, as I say, that's a global picture, and actually what you should be looking at is at each of the different constituencies and where there is the possibility of change.
Yes, and I suppose very few votes might shift things. There might be some really quite frustrating results for either side when we're looking at those final seats in each constituency. I do wonder, though, how much we're looking through this through the lens of unionism versus nationalism, when some parties that are openly ambiguous on the question of the Constitution seem to be gaining as well. The Alliance Party is expected to do better than they traditionally have done. Is this going to be an election less on the Constitution than we've seen in previous years?
No, I think it's very much on the Constitution, and actually, of course, the Northern Ireland Protocol has made that very critical as well. Sinn Féin, of course, if they become the largest party, will use that mandate to argue for a border poll, even though all of the evidence points to the fact that there is no majority for a united Ireland in Northern Ireland. But they will use it to cause division, and they will use it to call for a border poll. So I think that is very important to remember. Yes, the Alliance Party is doing very well, performing very strongly in all of the polls that have been taken. But so is the TUV, Tom. The TUV is the party led by Jim Allister. He at the moment just has one seat in the Northern Ireland Assembly, which has 90 seats overall. But he hopes to increase that number given his polling. But again, it depends on what the transfers do.
Yes, it seems to be that the DUP's vote is sort of sliding to the TUV. To some extent, the UUP vote is sliding to Alliance. There's a stratification in Northern Ireland. But I do want to just talk in a final minute on the practicalities of what it would actually mean for Sinn Féin to come first. Of course, the First Minister and the Deputy First Minister, despite their names, are equal positions in the executive.
Yes, so it just the First Minister just sort of indicates who is the leader of the largest party, Deputy First Minister, the second largest party. But actually, when they're in office, they have the same roles and the same responsibilities. And actually, it's a joint office. So First Minister can't take a decision without the Deputy First Minister agreeing, and vice versa. So it can be quite a battle in that office. And no doubt we'll see that in coming days. But Tom, I do have to say, I don't expect the executive to come back immediately. Because of the difficulties around the Northern Ireland Protocol, I think there will be talks after this election.
Well, it looks like it'll be more symbolic than anything else, but certainly fascinating results to watch through over this weekend. Arlene Foster, thank you so much for talking us through all those on the briefing this morning. That's it for the show. Coming up, it's To The Point, but first, here's the weather.
Looking ahead to today's weather, and the UK is looking rather cloudy in most areas this morning with some patchy rain in places. Let's take a look at the details. By the middle of the day, some brighter weather will be developing across the southwest of England, although this is likely to spark off a scattering of sharp showers. The southeast is likely to remain under a thicker blanket of cloud, and although most places look dry, the odd spot of drizzle is possible. Heading across to Wales, and here cloud will be lifting and thinning to give some sunshine, although as it warms up, a few showers will break out. The Midlands will continue to see rather a lot of cloud, giving the odd patch of light rain, and as a result, the temperature will be pegged back a little bit too. It'll feel quite chilly across parts of northeast England, as cloudy skies and some local drizzle will be combined with a cool, albeit gentle breeze blowing in off the North Sea. Most of Scotland will be shrouded in a blanket of cloud as well, and there'll be a bit of an east to west split in temperature, with the highest values towards the west. Little sunshine is likely across Northern Ireland around lunchtime, and there'll be a few showers, especially in the east. Nonetheless, temperatures will be around the early May average. Some heavier showers will develop across Wales and the southwest this afternoon, and rain will arrive in the northwest this evening. And that's how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday.